afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals, a regular meeting for July 23rd, 2025. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum, and with 3 members of the 5-member board, we do have a quorum today. Next item is the public's comment section. Has anyone reached out to staff to provide comments?
We have not had anyone reach out to staff.
Next item is a consideration of the minutes from the regular meeting on June 25th, 2025. Those minutes were provided to the board members. If there's no changes to those, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Will you call the roll for us?
Mr. Batchelor?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, so the minutes stand approved as written. Next item is new business, a variance request, and it's application Z25025 by Lance Strawn on behalf of Lance Strawn 2004 Irrevocable Trust, requesting a 9-foot variance from the required 35-foot front setback outlined in Chart 2 of the zoning ordinance, as well as a variance from Section 25EB of the zoning ordinance to allow an accessory structure to be located in front of the principal structure rather than the required 10 feet behind the front of the principal structure. This is for property located at 2114 Battleground Drive in an RS10 zone. The applicant is requesting a 9-foot front setback along Bond Court in order to construct an approximately 760 square foot accessory structure in front of the principal structure. Mr. Donovan, if you'd review that for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair Young. So the subject property and the applicant are seeking essentially 2 variances here, and we're going to start on the site exhibit here so that I can explain what those 2 variances are. What they're proposing to do is ultimately construct a 19.5 by 40 foot 2-story garage that would have a bathroom, golf simulator, lounge, office, and storage within that between the single-family residence and Bond Court. So the hatched area in this location on the south side of the residence is that existing carport and the storage building, and then the crosshatched area shows that proposed new structure. So the 2 variances that we're looking at here in particular is first the front yard setback. So under our zoning ordinance, on a front yard, or on a corner lot, you have 2 front yards that would have 35-foot setbacks. In this case, one from Battleground and the other one from Bond Court. So the setback line is shown here and then here. And you can see that the proposed structure and that prior existing structure were both in front of that. So for the proposed structure to be built there, you would need to issue a 9-foot setback variance to that front, reducing it down to 26 feet. There's an additional portion of our zoning code related to detached accessory structures, which that requirement states any detached accessory structure has to be 10 feet behind the front of the house. In this case, you have a corner lot here, so you have 2 fronts. Again, the front facade of the house on Battleground would be along this plane, and then along Bond Court would be along this plane. So to meet that 10-foot setback, we would look for an accessory structure to be somewhere in this area, set back 10 foot behind the front facade of that house. So that's the 2 pieces of the zoning ordinance that the variance is being sought from today. We'll go a little bit into neighborhood and existing conditions on the lot. So this lot is located, let me get back up here to the site map, is located on Battleground Avenue, just north of Northfield Boulevard, or Battleground Drive, excuse me, Northfield Boulevard and Battleground Drive. So we're just north of that. The subject property is zoned RS10. As far as surrounding areas go, they're the immediate area within a few blocks even is all zoned to RS10. They're developed as single-family residential. There are a few intermittent lots that are vacant, but most of this subdivision is prior developed. The subject lot itself is a conforming lot. It's of the proper size, of the proper width for our zoning ordinance. There's no oddity there where it doesn't comply with our zoning ordinance and that RS10 designation and the bulk that goes within it. There was previously, which we'll discuss some more, a non-conforming existing structure, that carport and storage building, that was demolished prior to this. Generally speaking, the neighboring properties around this do conform with our zoning regulations and those setback standards, accessory structure standards. Kind of the lone exception that I will tell you is that just to the south, you can see there on the picture, there is a pool which we consider an accessory structure that is between the structure and the road. But that has existed since 1995 at least, from we can tell from aerials. So that has been there for a while. So currently what's going on site is the residence is undergoing a renovation, and the proposal is to have that 20 by 35 carport has been demolished, and they're proposing to provide back a 19.5 by 40 foot 2-story building. So just some background from the board. These are Google Street views that show that existing carport. You can see here the carport and the storage building, and then this is from Bond Court, and then along Battleground Drive, carport and storage building, which is proposed to be replaced with, we have some elevations here, the 2-story building that you're seeing in front of you now, that will be full brick facades. So there's quite a different, size difference in the scale of those two buildings. The reason we're here today is the applicant has indicated that there was some damage by a fallen tree limb. Staff has asked for any evidence of that, either damage to the buildings prior to their demolition, or actually showing where the tree limb had hit those tree limb in those buildings. Kind of in absence of those, staff has no choice but to look like it was a determination to tear the building down, even though our non-conforming section does allow, if it is damaged less than 75% or less, it can be rebuilt, but we have no proof of that. So we have to look at that as they gave up their non-conforming status at that time that they demolished it, because we would need some sort of proof to substantiate where it ranged on that 75% requirement in our zoning ordinance. And if you can't substantiate that, what it does is any structure to replace it would need to be conforming at that time, which would lead us to this variance request that's before the board today. So staff has reviewed the application and determined that it does not meet all 5 standards set forth in Section 10 of the zoning ordinance for to grant a variance. I'm going to go through each of those. Each of the 4 standards, we do agree that 1 standard is met, but not all 4 of them are met, or not all 5 of them are met as required. So that first standard is the required variances are due to specifically identified characteristics of the land, such as narrowness, shallowness, shape, topography. Other conditions are such that compliance with 1 or more applicable zoning regulations would be extraordinarily and particularly difficult and result in undue hardship to the applicant. So staff has not identified any characteristic on the property that's extraordinarily or particular difficult in a way that would create a hardship for the applicant. The existing lot measures approximately 193 feet in width along Battleground Drive frontage and 258 feet along Battleground Court, which is well in excess of our minimum lot standard of 65 feet. And let me zoom back up, so since we're talking about lot items, so y'all can see the lot. So we're well in excess of that 65-foot lot minimum, so there's not really a narrowness issue there. The lot at its narrowest point is approximately 186 feet wide, so staff doesn't see any unusual condition for narrowness or shallowness. The lot gently slopes from the rear to Battleground, so staff hasn't identified any notable topography constraints that would create a hardship. Additionally, this lot size far exceeds the 10,000 square feet lot size minimum. It's 49,057 square feet, nearly 5 times our minimum. And the applicant had mentioned the hardship was the damage to the previously non-conforming structure. You know, that the presence of that structure does not, you know, justify a hardship under the applicable standards in staff's view. Standard number 2 is the requested variances are due to specifically identified characteristics that are unusual to the subject land as compared to other lands in the same zoning classification and in the same area. Staff here also does not believe that there are any unusual characteristics in the land compared to the surrounding zoning RS10 zoned parcels, including those that are corner lots. Neighboring properties are of similar size, shape, including the corner lots, and they have complied with accessory structure setbacks and front yard setbacks on those properties. Additionally, kind of corner lots are typically left to be larger to accommodate the increased setbacks as well, which you see in this lot and see in other similar corner lots within the immediate vicinity as well. The prior presence of a non-conforming structure is not an unusual and unique characteristic of the land in staff's opinion. And then item number 3, standard number 3 is that the request of variance are due to specifically identified characteristics or hardship were not created by any action or inaction of the owner's agent. Essentially what we're looking here is not self-created. Staff doesn't believe that this standard has been met. Staff believes, or the applicant indicated the request for the variance was based on damage of the fallen tree limb, which we have no way to substantiate that claim. In the absence of proof, we are reviewing it as a self-demolition, a self-created decision to do that. The need for the variance appears to stem in part from the location of the primary structure, which was originally constructed further back on the lot than was required under the zoning ordinance. As you can see, from Battleground, it's set back almost 90 feet, and then from Bond Court, the primary structure is set back almost 49 feet from those right-of-way lines. This was a decision that was not necessarily made with this owner, but it was a prior owner, and kind of that decision will transfer upon the sale. It is a known condition at the time of sale, as was the location of that other accessory structure by the applicant. For these reasons, staff found that the hardship to be self-imposed and concludes that this criteria hasn't been met for approval of a variance. And then I'm not going to go through our criteria number 4, but staff considers that to be that criteria to be met. Criteria number 5 is that the granting of the requested variance shall not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent properties, unreasonable increase in congestion in public streets, increase in danger of fire, or otherwise endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or morals, or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance or of the general plan for the area. So in staff's opinion, this standard hasn't been met either. While staff will concede, this will not impair light, create shadows, impair air to neighboring properties, or increase congestion, fire danger, or other public health, safety, or comfort items. Staff does believe that the requested variance would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance with regard to accessory structures on corner lots, with corner lots being a normal condition of development. This is something we see on almost every subdivision plat that we do, especially when new streets are being proposed. And the potential to open up all corner lots, even those newly being created, to a similar circumstance could occur. Allowing accessory structures on corner lots within the setback could potentially create conflicts with utilities and create site distance issues for those using that public street. So there are some reasons that those setbacks are there, related to most often utilities and site distance concerns. Staff does not recommend approval of the variance based on the application not meeting all 5 standards set forth in the zoning ordinance. If the variance were to be approved, staff would recommend the one following condition, and this is really more of a belts and suspenders condition, is BZA approval does not imply approval of building permits. An application for building permits shall be submitted and reviewed prior to the start of construction. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And Chair Young, I know the applicant has a presentation to go through with the board as well.
I'd like for you to touch on the structure that was there, what part that played in it, and if you could clarify some of that part there. If you,
Yes, sir. So the existing structure, there was a carport and a storage building that was there. My understanding is that I know at some point Building and Codes was reached out to, and they let us know that it had been torn down. Simultaneously, we had a building that had a building permit that was submitted to our office. It was under review when one of the planners in the office caught that the structure had been torn down. It was a non-conforming structure, and couldn't be built back without proceeding for a variance, because there was, from my understanding, something that we still like in this proof of how that, how the damage and demolition decision were made.
was that conforming?
So the structures you're seeing on the screen in front of you were not conforming. They would have been considered non-conforming structures. But they would have
there a
been.
good while.
They have been there for a while.
Okay. But the presence of those, or where they tore those down or not, or they got damaged, wouldn't have any bearing on whether the merits of this new construction?
It would not. In this case, you're seeing a substantial, increase and improvement there. You're also seeing a change in footprint. There's some additional area, which we can see on the site plan a little better. That was not originally covered by that prior.
Less encroachment,
Building.
more square footage being covered?
Yes, sir.
If I may, Chair Young,
Sure.
it might be worth noting that the zoning ordinance in section 28 does discuss non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures. And in subsection C, it discusses structures specifically and says that a non-conforming structure may be enlarged, maintained, repaired, or altered. However, no such enlargement or maintenance or repair can create any additional nonconformity or increase the degree of the existing nonconformity, And that is particularly true in subpart A. It says a structure is non-conforming by being wholly or partially within a minimally required building setback, as here, may be expanded vertically, provided that the vertical addition does not exceed the maximum building height, but it may not expand horizontally in any direction within the minimally required building setback. So if this were, if the claim is that this is a non-conforming structure that is being repaired or replaced, it has to have the exact same footprint as the prior structure did, and the structure that's being presented here is not. However, I think as Mr. Donovan noted, the structure that's being proposed here, I believe it's staff's position, is a difference in kind from what was there previously. Previously, it was an open carport and a storage shed, whereas now it's an enclosed garage that has, I don't know if you call it living space, but it has, you know, a golf simulator and a bathroom and things like that inside of it. So it's a difference in kind that was within the carport that was there previously. But regardless, it's a difference in the footprint, which would not be permitted under this portion of the zoning ordinance either. And that's a separate issue from the variance being requested, but that's another consideration.
All right. Any other questions for staff at this point?
Yes, I guess more procedural. I think at a previous meeting, we had to address all 5 standards and come up
Correct.
with a reason, and then that created some sort of precedence. Is it the same situation here?
Yes, sir. For any variance request, those 5 categories Mr. Donovan went through, the applicant has to demonstrate that each one of those categories is met. 4 out of 5 is not sufficient. They have to meet all 5 of those categories. And then this body has to make specific findings as to each category as to whether it is met or whether it's not met. But particularly if it is met, then it has to be the findings have to be set down in writing, which we'll do at the next meeting in the minutes. But each one of those categories will have to be considered and addressed.
And then that creates some sort of precedent?
Well, yes, sir. If depending on the reasoning of the board here, if the board were to say that this meets the standards for a variance, then other property owners in the city would be able to reasonably argue if their property meets the same requirements. So, you know, if the board finds that there was a particular unique characteristic of the property here that justifies the variance, any other property in the city that has that same characteristic could come with the same kind of a variance, and this would be kind of, they would be relying on the precedent set at this meeting in that future variance request.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Donovan, you touched on this. The only argument, and this may be the argument the applicant may make also as part of their presentation, so I may be getting ahead of myself, but in my view, the only argument one could make in reference to this being different is that it's got 2 fronts. And so my question to you is if Bond Court was not there, then they would have by right able to do this. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're getting at.
Your side setback would only be 10 feet.
Yes.
If you had a neighbor there, but since Bond Court's there, it changes the game.
Yes, that is correct. If instead this adjoined another, lot.
Right.
Instead of adjoining a right of way.
Yeah.
The setbacks would change on this lot line.
Right.
And then they would be the 10 feet instead of the 35.
Right. But you made the comment, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but in reference to the reason maybe that the city is not for it is that this could affect sightline, or in subsequent applications, it could affect sightline of, say, this side street that's considered a frontage. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, side distance is definitely a concern. There are also, while not in this application, issues with cover and utilities and being in
Right.
easements could be also a concern. There are several things. Those are kind of the 2 top of the list that could be the biggest concerns
Right.
moving forward on corner lots.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what the applicant has to say.
All right, I guess we'll let you guys go.
Chairman Young, Commissioners.
And if we could get City TV to show Mr. Roundtree's presentation at the podium.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you. I already understand that we're put you in another spot where we have to make some difficult decisions, so I appreciate that. So I want to just kind of walk you through our perspective on how this occurred, why it occurred, and why we stand here today. First of all, when the staff recommended denial, I can understand that. I mean, we understand the 5 criteria. We went through that, a few months ago, walking through each one of those things systematically. However, where I'm really wrestling is that there's a pragmatism to our decision making, there's a practicality to our decision making, and there's some realities on this site that I think are totally unique. And I really feel like I'm not standing here today because I want to put you in an awkward spot. I feel like there is a situation that we have to make a determination on today that does not put us in a harm's way in the future. I think this is very unique to this site, and if we approve it, I think we're going to enjoy the product, but at the same time, I don't think we have to fear that by approving this, we're going to create some sort of a trend in this direction, and I'll explain as we go forward. Basically, the background of the property, as Richard mentioned, there was a previous structure there. When the owner bought the property to basically enhance the property, they knew that structure was there. At some point, that structure became damaged. I don't have the exact timeline on when that limb fell on the structure, but what it did was it damaged the structure enough that it was no longer sufficient to do the job it was tasked to do. That structure was there for a purpose. The purpose is storage. The purpose was additional parking. The owner, under the assumption that as they remodeled this new home, that they'd still have that option for more storage and more parking. And you'll see that from the pictures that are current. I took yesterday just to kind of show the exact real-time situation that we're dealing with right now. So our request is that you approve the variance because we do feel like there was precedent based on that structure being there. And that structure wasn't there for 5 years. It wasn't there for 10 years. It's been there for over 30 years. And there's a natural landscape. I don't want to call it a buffer because it's really not a buffer, but there's a natural landscape line between Bond Court, that previous structure, and the house. So at the end of the day, if you're tasked to protect the quality and character of Murfreesboro, which I believe the BZA is to do, I don't feel like we're threatening that mission with this approval. So that being said, I'll go through each of the characteristics one by one so that we can kind of assume, we can work through that if we have to go ahead and make that same kind of statement. So as far as number one, I don't want to go through the whole statement as far as it's, specific identified characteristics of the land. I think in this situation, an acre lot, a home that's receiving a $4 million remodel, the request to have additional garage on this property on Bond Court, which is a large road with a 15-foot almost solid vegetative line that's been reinforced for over 30 years, I feel like that is a unique characteristic of this site. That is not a negative characteristic, I think it's very positive, but from the inception of that storage and garage area, carport area, they've screened that. The previous owners did not want you to see that from Bond Court, so they've always been proactive about allowing that landscaping to stay in place. To your point, Ken, if it was a new lot, that probably wouldn't be in a condition that you would have. You wouldn't have that much mature landscaping on the side of the property. So I think that would give us the unique characteristics of this particular site, that existing landscaping is already there, and there was precedent for a structure in that place. If we made a mistake, we made an assumption that there's a structure already there. It was kind of a revelation that that was a front yard whenever they went to planning to get the approval for the permit for the building, like, oh, you can't do that. That was shocking, especially on a $4 million remodel. You're like, you would think you could do something really nice and improve the property on the corner, but that's where we ran into a barrier. Number two, the specific characteristics of the subject land compared to other land in the zoning classification. I think this is very important. And I drove around the neighborhood because I do think that you're tasked with to make sure that we're not creating some kind of a situation where people are going to constantly challenge this assumption about 2 front yards. We've run into it many times. There's tons of front yard lots in Murfreesboro, but in this proximity, I drove around through the whole neighborhood looking for any kind of scenario that would be consistent, that someone could say, there's precedent set there, so we can do it. I didn't find anything. And now, again, it's not exhaustive, and I'm not a research scientist, but I did drive around looking for similar scenarios where we could say, hey, we are kind of pushing the line here, asking for this request. I found no scenario that would really comply in that way. Now, does this create a
Hey,
hardship, number
Clyde,
3?
let me stop you there. But doesn't that work in the reverse? That there is no precedent there, that, and then you're asking for it to be allowed now? Meaning, you didn't see anything that was like that, but we're asking for something different today that's not there. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I think it's a weird way to answer the question. I think the precedent's set by the existing home.
Okay.
That's
Go ahead.
it. I look for comparable scenarios where someone would try to say we are the same, that we're, they got to do it, we got to do it. But the characteristics of this lot are totally unique to the size of the home, the size of the lot, the adjacent relationships, Bond Court being a cul-de-sac. There's a lot of conditions that make this very specific to this site. So I don't feel like we are setting the tone.
Okay.
But I do think the precedent's set from this particular home, because that detached non-conforming structure has been there for over 30 years.
Okay. Thank you.
So as far as the hardship that's created now, this is a unique one in the fact that if I was gonna build a home or remodel a home at this cost, and I realized I could only have two-car garage, I'd probably change the design of the home. I'd probably really evaluate whether on a $4 million home, do I only want to have basically a substandard two-car garage? Or would I go, I think I'm going to approach it a little differently. So because of the precedent that was set with the existing structure, the assumption was made that they could go ahead and add the additional garage, which would suffice their needs, whether that be for a golf cart, for a car, or whatever. It was just the assumption they could have that additional space. So it is shocking when you find out that that's not even possible after you've done all this work on remodeling the house. They would have found room to probably expand that garage, knowing that this was not going to be permitted. Number 4, as far as granting the variance, is it detrimental to any of the adjacent property? The builder's gone to all the adjacent property owners and asked if this is any assumption or any presumption on them. He's gotten no negative feedback, and the feedback he's gotten, that's kind of interesting, like, oh, I'm so glad they got rid of that old dumpy carport, that they knew was there from history, and they thought this was an improvement to the property. So there's really no ill will on the adjacent property owners, from my understanding. And as far as the overall, number 5, and that's where we're after, I do think that your task as BZA is super site-specific. I think every condition, the only reason it comes to you is because it's a unique characteristic on that lot. And I think in this situation, because of the age of the house, the location of the house, the size of the property, the existing conditions of the property, and the fact that there's already a building there that was precedent in place, and there's a natural act of God that happened on that particular structure to minimize its functionality, I feel like this is very unique to this corner. So to reinforce that, I just want to show you some pictures, because it's one of those kind of things where I think you can understand why we have an argument, put it that way, and I think there's some logic to what we're asking for. But here's the presentation from yesterday's, just going on site. This is the view of the new home. It's not the full house. It's just partially the front of the house. There's actually another half of the house on Battleground on the left. But I'm focusing on that right-hand corner, because if you can look, back in that corner is where this new garage is proposed to be. It's behind a masonry wall. There's 2 large trees that are in front of it, so it's recessed quite a bit, further behind the house, as Richard mentioned. Definitely 10 feet, beyond the facade of the house facing, of the facade facing Battleground. So that's if you're driving down Battleground, that's basically you would see, preclude all the vans because it's under construction. Now, this is at the corner of Battleground and Bond Court. So where that arrow is facing is exactly where the face of that garage would be, maybe a little deeper behind the trees there, but there's already an existing vegetative line with both understory and upper story large trees that basically hide this from Bond Court on the initial turn and from Battleground. This is a view looking down Bond Court. So if you look on the left, all that vegetation is the screening for the proposed garage. This is looking back from the neighbor's house across the street. That if that garage were to be permitted, it would be behind all this vegetation. But I wanted you to see the level of the vegetation. This is not a newly planted buffer. This is a well-established, over time, vegetative line, borderline woods. And I've spoken to the developer, the builder, and I said, if we had to even enhance that, we'd be more than willing to do that. If we had to add some Nellie R. Stevens or some Cryptomeria or something else to make it a fully opaque line, we'd be more than willing to do that. But I want you to realize the reason this was in place is just the fact that it feels like a side yard, it looks like a side yard, and has been acting like a side yard almost in perpetuity for the life of the house. So this is the house from the side. What you're looking at right there is the footers where that puddle is. That were the footers that were already dug. That's the block for the footers on the assumption that we could build a building. There's no doubt that looks like a side of a house versus the front of a house. I'm not sure if that's precedent in terms of going, but I know that if they knew this garage couldn't be built, they would have changed their strategy on how they face that side, how they do windows. They were treating it as if that garage could be built with absolutely no concern that there's going to be any opposition towards that goal. If you look down towards the end, there's a garage with a man door. That's an undersized garage. It's a two-car garage, but it's not oversized by any means, and there's a man door. So basically, they left that whole wall blank in anticipation of adding the new structure. So all that being said, you know, we are respectful of the city's concerns. We know it puts us in a spot where we have to make some decisions. But I stand here today because I really believe that my role with our client is to look at the reasonableness of the situation, look at the improvement on the property, and ask the biggest question as BZA, are we hurting Murfreesboro as a result of the decision? Are we setting precedent that will really bring something as a negative impact on the city? And if you were in the same position as this owner, you know, investing $4 million on improving a piece of property, assumptions are made, but there's no question that everything they're doing is to enhance the character of Murfreesboro. Obviously, they want to live on battleground. And they're kind of shocked that this has come up because now all of a sudden all the investment becomes something of concern going, who would have thunk it? And that's really where we stand right now. So I'm here prepared to answer any questions you may have for me. The builder is here to answer any questions about, you know, maybe some of the timelines that I may not have totally accurate at this time, but I stand here respectfully asking for you to approve this variance on our owner's behalf.
So I have two questions. I'm going to assume that there's no pictures of the damage to this gazebo or whatever it is.
Kim, there's not.
You mind coming up to the, I'm gonna need you.
Sorry. There's not. When
Get
I
your
was
name.
in the process of doing this, the inspector Jeff Bola,
Can we get you to state your name as well for the
sorry,
record?
Matthew Neal.
I was gonna catch
Sorry.
you before you got away.
I had a conversation with the inspector, and he asked me if, number one, when the tree was on there, it cracked the existing structure, and it hit with force that cracked the slab that they had in there. Well, I was a kid. I used to drive by there and see that. I'm not a kid anymore, so that was 35 years ago, okay? And back then, maybe even 45, back then they poured that on grade. There was no footer. So Jeff asked me, he said, dig that up and see if there's a footer there. There was no footer. So in order to do it correctly, we dug up or pushed the slab over, finished breaking it up. So that's what happened. I didn't think to take a picture of it. I didn't think I needed to. In hindsight, I wish I had. So that, and then I went to planning and zoning, and the receptionist we were filling out the paperwork, and one of the planners walked in and she said, what is the side setback? And she told me, and she looked at it and she said, yeah, you'll be fine right there. And then like a week or so later, I got a call from Amelia Kerr saying, we're not going to accept it because you have two fronts. I said, but it's the side of the house, it's facing battleground. She said, well, it doesn't matter, you have two fronts. I said, well, he owns the lot behind them too. So is that going to be three fronts? How does that work? So was some confusion. I even have a neighbor. I asked all the neighbors on bond, no problem. Had one that's nice enough to show up today. So that's how we got to here.
Okay. So my next question, maybe not for you, but for staff, if we could pull up the site, the plan design and the lot itself. Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, I know this would be kind of awkward, but is there not a way to put this and have the driveway go the length of the side of the house and have the accessory structure at the back of the house versus the side of the house? especially if they own the lot behind them, then they could redraw the line and not have any issues with the rear setback.
Well, if you look at that, if you pull that back up, okay, you see where it says proposed shed?
Correct.
Okay, that's the master bath, beautiful, huge window. And the pool is to the inside, will be coming off that existing patio. Huge pool and accessories out there. And what they didn't want to do is look at a garage right outside this huge picture window from the master bath. That makes sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I still don't understand though, if you moved it in line with the existing yes, thank you.
Talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying, the huge windows there, they were trying not to,
Well, but the window sill would be looking on the pool, right? Is that
no,
what you're?
it'd be looking straight out the back where you're asking about.
Oh, maybe I misunderstand where the pool is.
There's no
My
windows right there
interpretation
on
is
that
the windows
side.
would be in that area.
Yeah, that's correct, right there.
So the pool is where I was proposing this garage to go. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. And I'm assuming the pool's already built? Okay.
I want to touch on one of the items, the view shed, I guess, or let's say you're coming, and I don't know what road connects to Bond Court. If you come off Battleground on down where you take a left behind there, is that where you're concerned, if you're looking to make a right turn to come up by the house, right to left on this? Like the
So,
vegetation is more in the view in the view that the city would be concerned about versus where the structure would be.
I take it, Chair Young, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what you're discussing is criteria number 5, where I pointed out that there could be concerns with damage to the code as a whole. In that case, that particular item is looking at this site and saying if this were approved, would there be damage in the code that would essentially make a precedent somewhere else? So we're looking at corner lots, period. When I say side distance could be an issue, utilities can be an issue. Those are places that approval of this variance in staff's opinion could cause damage to future enforcement of the zoning code. So it's not specifically saying there is a side distance issue with this lot. It's the requested variance and the decision could create issues within the zoning code for future lots of similar means.
Okay. Not sure this applies, but I'll still ask the question. Let's assume that Bond Court's not there and this is just a front yard and they've got a side. What issues would they have with this? Can it sit out to the side of the house or just have to meet the side setback is all they're dealing with?
Yeah, I think I understand, yes. If Bond Court were part of the neighboring lot,
Yeah, just,
this would be treated as a 10-foot side yard. The location of the structure, this is, I would say fairly typical of what we would see for an accessory structure tucked back on, the side of a house or in the rear yard. That's working under the assumption Bond Court is
yes,
part of another lot.
okay.
Chair Young, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, just to add some historical context, the zoning ordinance was, it's probably been 20 years or so since it was amended to require that 10 feet behind the front of the principal structure. And I think the reason why that was done was to make the to make the accessory structure secondary to the principal structure so that the accessory structure would not be the prominent structure from the street. Like it would be secondary in nature for the view shed of that particular lot as opposed to the principal structure being the dominant structure. It's just a little bit of historical context.
If, let's say that they don't have to deal with the setback issue here, they could get it farther but the screening was heavier along Bond Court. Because it's a front yard, would the screening matter, or?
You know, and I guess I'm taking would it matter from would there be some sort of public safety concern with the vegetation, and would that exist in line there? The answer would be no. If you're talking about would it affect staff's position on permitting the structure as shown, that wouldn't really change staff's position there.
I mean, I think what we're tasked with is, figuring out a way to, if we believe that structure should be allowed, we're going to have to verbalize at least 4 of the. I mean, I think staff has already agreed on one of the points, but we're going to have to verbalize or agree with the applicant's reasoning. So, whether we like it or not. Whether we approve the structure, its existence, its design, whatever, I think we're tasked with verbalizing it. And Mr. Halburn, I think you were the last person who was able to to verbalize all 5 on the last application. Not to put any pressure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, if it would help in any way, because vegetation is vegetation, trees can grow and die, and there's already a masonry wall in the front of the home that kind of basically shields it from battleground. If it would help at all to provide a masonry wall between the proposed garage and the vegetation, just to make sure that there is screening long-term, the builder is willing to do that if that's necessary. If that helps build another layer of protection from the adjacent properties.
Would they want, I'm just asking a question, would they want to extend that masonry wall all the way to the property line? Because you would think they would want a wall to help screen the pool.
I think Ken, I think you're honest. I think there's going to be a lot of need for screening, because once you get beyond this point, that new lot they're building on, there's no vegetation at all. So there will be some sort of a privacy component.
I don't know about the fence. The permit's been pulled. Just haven't gotten the design back from the designer architect. But yeah, I mean, I can take a brick wall right there and give it additional permanent screening and then attach to whatever the pool will be. But I mean, certainly it's going to be aesthetically pleasing and complementary to what we're doing.
Right.
Any further questions for the applicant at this point before the public hearing?
I guess could we have the applicant address the point number 1, that the specifically identified characteristics of the land, such as, and using the definition of characteristics such as narrowness, shallowness, shape, topography, or other conditions of the land are such that compliance with one or more of the applicable zoning regulations would be extraordinarily and peculiarly difficult or would result in undue hardship. Your answer regarding the existence of the previous property and things like that, and the uniqueness of, I don't really consider the existence of a corner lot to be unique, or the fact that Bond Court exists. What specifically about the lot, the land, the narrowness, shallowness, shape, topography makes this unique? Can you address that?
So what I believe makes it unique is the word unique, in my opinion, means that this lot is unique to among other lots. It's not unique to being a corner lot, because we have corner lots everywhere, and we have 2 fronts on multiple lots around the city. But when you look at the criteria of the size of the lot, the location of the lot, the size of the home on the lot, the quality of the home on the lot, and then to know there was an existing structure there for 30 years, that was the assumption the owner made. That was, if there was a mistake that was made, it was understanding that I don't think if we would have come forward with no structure there in the past, we would have brought this structure forward. I think the house would have been designed differently.
Yeah, no, excuse me, but just the land itself, the lot itself. I know we've talked a lot about it being a corner piece of property. We talked about the existence of the carport, the destruction of the carport, the house, the existing house, the improvements to the house, the amount of money that's being spent, completely understand all that. What we're wrestling with, or at least I'm wrestling with, is the language that we're given here. And what we're given here speaks to or asks the question about specifically, and can you address the narrowness, shallowness, shape, topography of the land or the lot itself, not irrespective of the
Right.
property itself, the improvements to the property, the existing structure, the improvements to the structure, the previous carport. So with all those notwithstanding, can you answer specifically the
And I don't know,
characteristics of the land?
It's probably a Richard or Matthew question to go. Is that a general list of criteria? If there are more than that, if there's land characteristics, or are those the four that really matter? Topography, size, narrowness? Is that kind of like a list of ideas, or is that really
No.
like exhaustive?
So that is almost verbatim the verbiage from the Tennessee Code Annotated on variances. It does have other conditions of the land, you know, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Tully's mouth, but I think from planning staff standpoint, we're looking for a condition of the land, not structures erected on said land.
Yes, from a legal standpoint, it cannot be structures that are on the land because those are by definition created by the owner, right? Whether it's this owner or their predecessors in the past. So it has to be, and as the definition is specifically identified characteristics of the land. Now, the list that Mr. Batchelor correctly noted, it does begin with such as, so there might be other characteristics of the land, but it has to be characteristics of the land itself. And as Mr. Batchelor absolutely correctly said, it cannot be the existence of a prior structure or where the house is located on the land or the location of the driveway. Things like that that was created by the past owner, and that cannot be the basis for a variance. And it has to be the land itself, as Mr. Batchelor noted.
Okay. And so, you know, hence our challenge. So I guess with that context, can you
Yes,
address it?
Again, I think what makes this lot unique is the fact that vegetative stand has been there for probably 40 or 50 or 60 years. That typically in new construction, especially, you know, where we're concerned about precedent, it's going to be a cleared lot. You're going to plant your street trees, your required buffer. You know, you're going to do things that are required in order to make that lot in conformity with our current ordinance. In this situation, that's why I drove around to look for situations where you have 60 or 80-year-old trees, where you have decisions made from a naturalistic standpoint to preserve a buffer. No one else on the street did that. That's unique to this land, that vegetation is substantial, and it's been respected over the life of that lot. At one point, that lot was a full woods, and someone cleared it and put a house there, but for some reason, intuitively or whatever, they have kept that natural buffer in perpetuity of the house. As long as it's been a home there, those trees are, again, they're 60, 80 years old. So I feel like that is unique to this piece of property. It's not narrowness, it's not topography, but the fact that there's a natural buffer that they're responding to, that really precludes you thinking it's a front yard even. I mean, if that vegetation wasn't there, they may have basically totally revamped the whole facade along Bowen Court. If they knew that was exposed to a front, that land, that vegetation makes it very unique. And intuitively, when you see that, there's nothing in your brain that says that's a front yard. And that's why I think the assumption was made, because it was not treated that way. The architecture doesn't reflect that, and it's really a result of that vegetation. If that vegetation wasn't there, I feel like you'd go, yeah, it's just like any other house that's a corner lot. They're going to do something nice on that side. I mean, Murfreesboro makes us on lots that are corner lots with like a townhome, we have to make it look like a front, even though we know it's the side, just because we have two fronts. So I think that characteristic of this particular property has really encouraged the way the design has happened over time to make this lot unique. If that helps you understand how that could apply.
Well, I think you've identified it as a unique property, but I think the way that number one is written, and I would need some help here, is that I think we all would view the vegetation as a positive. I think what we're looking for is where is the hardship. So you've identified a positive aspect of a lot, but in order to grant this, we have to identify, I believe, we have to identify what is the hardship that is being created. So for example, if you were going to place this structure in a way that would force you to remove the vegetation, then that would create a hardship. But in this case, you want to preserve it, which is noble. You want to preserve it, but we're still tasked with identifying, and that's what I'm asking you, what specifically is the hardship? And is that what we're having to identify?
Yes, it has to be, the applicant has to show by substantial material evidence that specifically identified characteristics of the land create the hardship. So you're absolutely right. So the fact that there are some unique aspects of the vegetation, perhaps, that vegetation is not what creates the hardship. You're absolutely right. So it has to be a characteristic of the land that's creating the hardship.
Okay. So can you address that?
I think typically in this situation, your initial hardship is the fact that there's 2 front setbacks. That is a unique characteristic of this piece of property on a corner lot. How that's addressed, if you're fully aware of that assumption, then you're going to change the way the house is developed over time. We did not increase the footprint of this house. We did not make the house any larger than the previous house. It got bigger volume-wise because it went to 2-story. But respectfully, out of the history of the property, the footprint of the house is the exact same it was. That was influenced by the vegetation. It was influenced by the size of the lot, influenced by a lot of the decisions related to, again, it's back to the structures, not the land itself. But the fact that the owners decided not to make the house any larger, the fact that they made decisions based on how that buffer, that landscaping is there on the side, it dictated the size of the home. So the hardship is now created that we didn't realize that the fact that vegetation was dictating, they didn't want to take the vegetation down. They liked the screening from Bon Court. But if that vegetation wasn't there, it would probably change the way the direction of the design went, not only on this house, but on the past houses. Again, we didn't increase the footprint. So I think that is unique to that piece of property. Again, it's not because of narrowness, it's not because of grades, but we had a natural element that's been there, like I said, indefinitely, as far as we're concerned, that we didn't want to touch that. And as a result, hardship is a tough word because you can tear them down or you can leave them, but the hardship is they elected to keep those trees, respect what they thought was a precedent based on history, and as a result, it's now creating a hardship because they didn't design their house in such a way that understood that limitation on the property. They would have, again, if they knew what they knew now, they'd probably have taken that vegetation out and reworked the house with a whole different orientation potentially to make sure that side of the house served their purposes for functional needs, served their needs from, because again, now you run into an economic hardship when you spend that kind of money. I don't want to have a $4 million house with an undersized 2-car garage. Now it becomes a little bit of a problem in the future because now you have a house that's a little bit of a different situation because you would normally have multiple garages on a home that size. So I think that this is creating a hardship in the real time for them to go, we had no idea. And as a result now, here we go, our house is designed appropriately based on the characteristics of the lot because they kept that vegetation. They decided to keep it and they thought they were doing the best thing for the neighbors, for the best thing for Bon Court to keep it. And now we're finding out that's not even negligible. That's to say that's not relevant and that's a characteristic of land, I think would be a hardship.
I think Mr. Batchelor said it pretty well. That's the screening there is a check in the column that it would help hide it from the view shed. But there's, I'm leaning towards did the owner create it? Is there an option around back? Now, granted, I know that it would affect the view from the house, but you're requesting to affect the view on the side and everybody that's traveling there. So it's certainly gave us a quandary.
I think it's a unique characteristic of the land, though. I think if that's why I'm asking, is that an exhaustive list of, because there's a lot of characteristics of land other than topography and size of lot and narrowness of lot. I mean, if there's a historic tree there, if one of those trees were historic, we'd probably go, that tree is something we're going to preserve because of its history, because of its precedent being in that place. So therefore, that characteristic of the land would influence the way we design the building. I don't think there's ever a day that they thought that they're going to tear out all those trees along Bon Court because they thought, again, favorable for them and favorable for the neighbors, and that is a specific characteristic of the land. You won't find that anywhere else on any other lot in the neighborhood for a while. That amount of vegetation along the side of the house like that.
Any further questions? We're ready to move to public hearing. Thanks for your time. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Is there anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If so, if you'd come forward and give us your name and address, and you can provide us any comments you may have.
My name's Mike Pruitt. I live 2 doors down. This meeting is kind of twofold for me because I've never been to one. I've lived here my whole entire life, 55 years, and I've always wanted to attend one. Thank you for allowing that.
Welcome.
It just so happens that I met this fella right here when they started building this house. I understand what y'all are doing. I understand both sides. Me, as a neighbor, what they've done over there is unbelievable. Stupid story. Dr. Hardison lived in that house. I was riding bicycles with Mark when we was in 6th grade, and he got run over by a car. I remember it like yesterday. It's one of the saddest days of my life because our teacher told us he would probably never live. So I remember that house from when I was 10 years old, even though I lived, about 2 miles away. I'm sure all of y'all have been by there and looked at it. It's an amazing house. It's so cool. The vegetation deal, I think they should take the vegetation down and still build the shop or the whatever garage because it's so nice. I mean, I would want to show it off. Only neighbor here, but I agree with it. They've done amazing things over there. It looks so good. I don't think they're going to throw up something that's ugly because they haven't so far. So me, myself personally, and my wife, I'm all for it. Thank y'all
Thanks,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, we will close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
And to clarify, the motion needs to be paired with us verbalizing our agreement with all 5.
Yes, I think the best would be if it were a motion to either approve or deny based upon, and you go through each of those 5 as to whether you think they're met or not met. That would probably be the best, but it might be a bit cumbersome. So the other thing you could do is just set forth each of those 5 requirements, and you can, I suppose the board could vote independently on each requirement, whether it's met or not. And all you need to do is find that one of the requirements is not met or all 5 are met, and then make a motion based upon that. So I think either would be sufficient.
I know I keep going back to this, and y'all are going to argue with me, and so I'm probably not going to win this argument. But I get that there are all kind of corner lots in the city of Murfreesboro, and I get that we consider them as both that they have to meet front setbacks. Logically, that to me is could be considered practical difficulty because, again, if the road was not there, they would be able to do this by right. And so, to me, the having 2 front sides is a practical difficulty. The only problem with that is then as a board, we're going to have to be very specific. Can you use the fact that you got trees as a part of the fact that this is a practical difficulty? I'm not sure you can. My only argument would be the fact that we've got 2 front setbacks, and if we didn't have 2 front setbacks, they would have the right to do this, and we wouldn't even be discussing it. But it doesn't sound like that's a good argument.
The problem from the legal standpoint is that would satisfy the first requirement. That would be the specifically identified characteristic of the land. The problem is the second requirement is that that characteristic has to be unusual to the subject land as compared to other land in the same zoning classification in the same area.
Okay.
And from what I understand, there's, I think, 10 other corner lots within a mile of this one. So if board says that that's unusual, then that could be the determination of the board, but you do risk setting that precedent for future applications. So.
Which, and I think the applicant has answered that fairly in number 2 with, if we take into consideration, although there's lack of proof, and take them at their word that, there was, and we have proof of the existence of that previous storage building, I think number 2 is answered, so.
Help me out there.
Yeah, so number 2 is that the specifically identified characteristics are unusual to the subject land as compared to other land in the same zoning classification. And I realize this is getting back to the building versus the land argument, but the unique set of circumstances that were created by the existence of the carport on the land, which, may obviate my previous comment about the unique characteristics, because it has to be about the land, not the building, either existing or prior. So.
Right, and that's where the third standard comes in, which is that the characteristics of hardship were not created by any action or inaction of the owner or their agent. And that would include their predecessors and interests, so the prior owners in the past that built that carport. So the carport itself can't be the hardship because that would have been created by the prior owner.
But if you used, I'm going back to my argument, if you use the fact that you had 2 front setbacks that you're having to meet, that is a practical difficulty.
It is, but is it unusual to this land?
So, I guess big picture here, as a board, we appreciate the improvement. I think we would all agree it's an improvement to the property. How do we thread the needle here and, take into consideration the improvement that's being made and the existence of the previous structure, which, correct me if I'm wrong, had the owner or owner's agents asked for permission to build the structure prior to the destruction of the previous structure, would it have been approved or no?
No. My understanding is the pre-existing structure was also within that side setback. So had they requested permission, but I don't know that we know. I think we're treating the previous structure as a legal non-conforming use. So.
It is being treated as a legal, non-conforming structure. That structure has been there, well established. Any permitting record of it would have long since disappeared. Had the existing structure been in place, they come in to pull the permits. The proposed structure still would not have been approved because there is a increase in the footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So the what you have before you would still be here before you unless they change the footprint of the building to mimic what was there prior.
And I believe they also, if in that instance, if they were going to stick with the same footprint and say they were just replacing that previously non-conforming structure, I think they would also have to prove that the damage to the structure was less than 75% of the value. So they would have to have some photos of the actual damage from the tree limb and then determine whether it was greater or lesser than 75% of the value of that prior structure, because the zoning ordinance differentiates between the level of damage. Essentially, if it's completely destroyed or close to it, over 75%, then they cannot maintain the nonconformity. They have to bring it up to the current standards. But if it's less than 75% of damage and they want to repair it or replace it, and they can prove that it was less than 75%, then they would potentially be able to. But that's a different question than what's before the board today, which is this variance request.
when I see an application like this, me personally, I try to see if there's a way to, like I said, thread the needle or figure it out, because just saying no because it doesn't fit all the characteristics. I mean, what we're supposed to do is apply some logic and against the rules. When there's 2 or 3 that we're hung up on, it kind of gets, while I would like to be helpful and work it out, there, like as Ken mentioned, that there's options on the lot of where to put something if they feel like they need something like this. And with 2 or 3 things that I have a question about being able to say yes, one of is the desire of the landowner, yet makes the most sense and thought it was going to work, and I hate that it's turned on them. I just get, I have a hard time saying yes to all those, I guess is where I'm landing, as much as I'd like to help out and make everybody happy and make the city happy and the landowner happy and all that. It's just enough sticking points that it's hard to say yes to all of them.
I share your frustration. I mean, it's
It's going to be a nice development, and I grew up around the house too, and it's, but if I'm taking the facts and didn't know anything about the property ahead of time, there's just enough, like I say, I can't say yes to all those.
yeah. I mean, I've got the same concerns. It's, you know, logic and aesthetics say, you know, it should be approved, but I feel like we're kind of handcuffed here, and I would love to come up with a creative solution. I can't, unfortunately.
I mean, the only solution I can come up with is the whole 2 front setbacks. But I'm not sure it would be applicable to each one of these, especially number 3.
Right.
Okay. So are we looking for a motion?
I think, like I said, you could either do a motion to deny and then lay out which of the requirements you think are not met, or you could go requirement by requirement 1 through 5, decide which ones are or not met, and then make a motion based upon that determination. I think either would be sufficient.
Yeah, I think collectively we all have an issue with at least one. So, I mean, that essentially creates the motion to reject.
Right. You will need to make the specific findings, though, as to each one.
Just as we would
Yeah.
for an approval?
Yes, I believe so.
Would a motion, if they chose to make a motion to deny and say they agreed with staff's analysis on them, be sufficient, Mr.
Yes.
Tully?
Well,
Or if there's only one that they agree with staff's analysis, point to that specific.
I honestly, you know, back to my argument, if I was making a motion, it would just be one of them, because I can't get past number 3 associated with 2 front setbacks.
number 3 being that it was not created by the action or inaction of the owner.
Well, I don't know, and maybe I'm looking at this variance in this, maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing, but I've got number 3, that neither the practical difficulties nor the unusual characteristics of the property resulted from any deliberate action of the landowner. So am I,
That's
what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a restatement of the zoning ordinance, but that's substantially, the zoning ordinance number three says, quote, that the specifically identified characteristics or hardship were not created by any action or inaction of the owner or the owner's agent. Essentially, another way of saying what you just stated, Mr. Howard.
okay.
Well, I was like Mr. Halliburton in that the 2 front yards is unique to this design. And it's, you know, again, the trees help that case to screen it more so than a new construction that's on a corner lot. But if that then spills into number 2, that's, well, what's unique about that, then you kind of get tripped up and get a little, okay, can I really say that this is that unusual, or just because it's been there a while and it had something there and it's got the mature trees that we think was done. It's just a tricky one.
So can we make a motion on what Mr. Donovan? I don't know that we can, we just have to agree on one. I
The
mean,
zoning ordinance states that the BZA shall make specific written findings of fact on each of the above standards in either granting or denying a variance. But then it restates that again to make super sure by saying that specific written findings that each of the above standards have been met by the applicant are required in order to grant a variance. If in the judgment of the BZA, each of the above standards has not been met by a preponderance of the evidence, the variance must be denied. So you certainly have to make specific findings of fact, specific written findings of fact if you're going to grant. If you're going to deny, initially it says you have to make specific findings of fact. But at the very least, if in your judgment each of the standards has not been met by a preponderance of the evidence, then you can deny. I think the safest way to move forward, given that somewhat unclear provision, is it would be best if you, rather than just adopting the staff report and saying you agree with their reasoning, that you independently state, 1 through 5, whether you believe that it has been met in this case or not. So that would be my suggestion.
yeah, so I'm just rereading the application as it relates to number 1, that the specifically identified characteristics of the land, separate from the structure, the vegetation, it being a corner lot, that specifically that has not been met because there's not specific characteristics of the land that creates an undue hardship.
So your motion is to deny the application based on not passing number 1?
Yes.
Is that sufficient for, or it's not matching all of it, or Jacob?
Yes, I believe that is sufficient. Or alternatively, it seemed like Mr. Halliburton's reasoning was number 1 would be met, but number 2 would not, because it's not unique. I think either would be sufficient to deny the application. Yes.
It's a motion to not. I will second begrudgingly, and number 3 with the action of the landowner being one additional one that gives me pause.
I think we have agreement on 4. Again, it doesn't matter, but you need specific findings, right?
Yes, it's probably best if you.
Okay, so yeah, I don't think anybody agrees that granting the requested variance will unduly be detrimental to the other land in the vicinity. So I think we move on to 5, unless anybody disagrees with that. Okay. And then the last is that the granting the requested variance will not impair an adequate supply of light air adjacent properties. So I don't think there's any objection to number 5 either, but again, we've already found 2 other reasons. So I think we're in agreement on 5.
Okay.
All right, so motion and a second. Legal staff happy with our motion, our findings?
Yes, I believe that
Okay.
that satisfies
Call
the
roll for
requirements.
us. Any further
Mr. Bra-
discussion?
Well, the only comment I'll make is, the only reason why I'm voting against it is about the unusual character, about the two front setbacks, and it's, with respects to that argument, this is not unusual. I just want to make that clear.
All right, if you call the roll for us.
Mr. Batchelor?
Aye.
Vice Chair Halliburton?
Aye.
Chair Young?
Aye. All right, so motion denies been approved. Appreciate your time and understanding and providing information and trying to get the clarity on it. So, our next item is staff reports and other business.
Only thing, and I'll confirm this later on, I do expect to meet it next month. I think our cell tower that was deferred several months back is going to be ready to go, but I will send out an email to confirm when we get to that point.
All right. If there's no other business, we will adjourn.